Ready when you are.
Hard Knocks, Supervox, and the Doc's Cock all are proudly on display in this deathly instalment of I'll Explain Later, the Doctor Who podcast that has a severe case of Grimwade syndrome, with your hosts John West
and Matt Needer. Tonight, the Fourth Doctor has some sand in his craw, while Leela's surrounded by creepy men. Typical night at the BBC bar. We take a nice big huff of helium and settle into the Robots of Death.
And the Third Doctor hits the wireless, and you know what that means. VR porn, full frontal nudity, and an episode so good they played it twice. We load up on blip juice and hit the dodgems in the Paradise of Death.
Hello, John.
Hi, Matt.
How are you doing?
I'm tickety-boo.
Excellent, excellent. Well, even though to our listeners it may appear that only a week has elapsed since we last sat down to talk about Doctor Who, it's actually been a couple of months, hasn't it?
Yes.
But it's good to be back in the saddle, and here we are talking. It's
quite a morbid lineup you've got here.
Oh, it's quite a morbid lineup. I mean, I will be honest and say that no more thought went into it than just picking two stories that ended of death.
And yet, there is quite a lot of thematic connective tissue.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, and you put no thought into deciding what you're going to say about these stories.
No, and yet I feel there's quite a lot of thematic overlap between the two stories, which we'll of course get to. But
well, there you go. My low intensity planning pays off once again.
Well, it's more that we'll find any tenuous link between.
This is very true.
Doctor Who stories.
This is very true. Well, tonight we're looking at the Robots of Death. Fourth Doctor story, and the Paradise of Death, Third Doctor radio adventure, which we'll come on to shortly. But we'll start with the Robots of Death. John, you've got the facts at your fingertips. When did this broadcast?
Yeah, so this is series 14, and was broadcast between the 29th of January and the 19th of February 1977.
Yep.
And it's a pretty simple setup, I think.
Yep.
The Fourth Doctor and Leela arrive on a mining vessel on a desert planet, which is staffed by a crew of. It's interesting because they're sort of workers, but they're also sort of the cast of Murder on the Orient Express.
Yes.
So they can't. It's very difficult to tell whether they're on a luxury holiday or whether they're meant to be working. Even they seem to not be quite sure at some points. But yeah, so the Fourth Doctor and Leela arrive on this mining vessel. There's a crew of people, and there's also a crew of robots of various different types. And it emerges pretty quickly that some of the robots have gone rogue and are starting to kill the passengers, or rather the workers, the crew, one by one. But obviously there's a sort of Svengali-like figure behind it all, and it's a murder mystery, essentially.
It is.
With quite a bit of Isaac Asimov frosting.
Just a little bit.
Yeah,
just a tiny bit. Fair to say that this is extremely well regarded.
Indeed.
Even
I knew that.
Yes. And probably, I think, was one of the first stories that I ever saw, but we'll come on to my history with it.
And of course, this is the Hinchcliffe era, so, I think Talons is directly after this, which obviously, we discussed at length previously, but this is considered to be a pretty good run of the show. It's not just a good serial in the middle of otherwise dross. This is kind of core period of kind of highly regarded Who, right?
But that's the conventional wisdom, John. I'm interested in John West's take. Did you enjoy the Robots of Death?
I did. I did enjoy it. I felt that I didn't think it quite lived up to its Premier League reputation. I thought it was going to. And it was really frustrating for me, this. I thought episodes 1 and 2, part 1 and 2, were outstanding. Really outstanding. And I was so excited going into part 3. At which point I felt like thematically it held up, and the performances held up, and the set design held up. But I just felt that the plot devices and the development of the plot kind of did that collapse into running around and so on and so forth. And I felt there were quite a few points that expositionally weren't laid, so it was just it became a bit confusing as to how characters knew what they knew. We'll get onto that. So I thought that just as a technical piece of plotting, it sort of fell apart a bit from episodes 3 to 4. But very, very good, and certainly the thematic stuff, which we'll get to, and the characters, the performances landed for me. This was directed by Michael E. Bryant, and I thought there was very effective use of kind of close-ups, and I liked particularly the point of view stuff from the robots.
Yeah,
that felt very, and I'm sure we'll come on to the similarities with some of the new Who, particularly Russell T Davies era Doctor Who.
Yeah, I mean, for a fully indoors story, he really milks the, how you shoot it, what you can get out of it. It's very dynamic direction.
I felt so, yeah. So it keeps, but yeah, I just felt that. Basically, that whole explanation with D84, the kind of detective robot. There's a crucial scene between the Doctor and D84 in I think episode 3, which kind of focuses on the theory that Taron Capel, a mad scientist who believes in robots overthrowing people, is he must be on the ship, and they received some letters. It's not really clear what that stuff about the letters is really about, and it just sort of... And why the Doctor then deduces, he must be aboard this vessel. That doesn't really make any sense at all, that he would definitely be aboard the vessel. So it just doesn't kind of hold together in that way. But it's engaging, and I liked the thematic stuff, and we'll come on to that.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's like I think I probably largely agree with you. I mean, I loved this. I think this is really excellent, and I think it largely does deserve its reputation. In terms of saying that I had a bit of a long history with this, I think it was probably one of the first stories when I was getting into Doctor Who in the early 90s, one of the early stories that I got on VHS from our local library, and... why would you not? I mean, why would you not pick up that VHS? I mean, that cover with the robot faces on it. And we'll come on to the set design and the general design of things, but the art direction is great. And the robots of death. I mean, that's like...
but they look great. They're terribly sinister, aren't
well.
they?
Yeah, totally. But I think, it's the sort of Friends type summary of what you would call this episode. It's the Agatha Christie one with the robots, basically.
Yeah,
and that is what the plot is. And I found it quite boring as a child, to be honest, because I think even then I recognised, the story archetype, and I think I've revisited it multiple times over the years, and still, it's like, to be honest, I mean, literary classics, I'm sure, the Agatha Christie murder mystery, nail down who it is. That's never a type of story that's ever particularly interested me. I mean, no, people love it, and I think I have seen it done well. But it's a plotting archetype that does nothing for me personally.
See, I was delighted, and like in episode 1 when. It really early on, it's sort of they're all in the lounge and it goes from one person to the other. And without knowing anything about where this was going, I thought, this is completely... And it's not just Agatha Christie, it's Sidney Lumet's Murder on the Orient Express. It's that cast of characters, everyone with a secret, everyone with
the original
suspicion.
title for the script was apparently The Sand Miner Murders, which is like, obviously, I think maybe even nails the Christie motive. I mean, horses for courses, like I'm not saying that I'm not going to go into a deep dive on why. It's just, it's
definitely my horse and my course. I will ride that horse.
Feel free to own them. Feel free to own that horse and take that course. But it's just never
I'll borrow the horse.
Never a plot structure that's particularly excited me. And so every time I've watched it in the intervening years, it's all been like, I think this is a well executed Agatha Christie pastiche. But the thematic meat of it is what really leapt out at me this time round, and what I found fascinating. And I think probably what we may end up spending the bulk of this discussion.
The lion's share.
I think this plays incredibly well in 2023, because what it shows, and what it shows,
which is a pity for anyone listening to this in 2024.
Yeah, just fast forward now 20 minutes. It's all about a society which is 100% reliant on technology, but also completely distrustful of technology.
Yeah,
which is interestingly, I think, a period that we are finding ourselves in, sort of partially now. And this is spelt out. At one point, there's the line in the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's not obliquely sort of. It's not just part. This is directly discussed.
There's the line like Leela from the start, encountering a robot for the first time, and the Doctor has to explain what robots are, and she refers to them as creepy mechanical men. She is like a bit freaked out by the fact that they look like people, but they don't have that.
It's the whole uncanny valley thing.
Well,
right?
This is what I was going to come on to. Like, they spend a long time, like, one of the things that does make me laugh is they say, like, robophobia. What's robophobia? As if, like, robophobia isn't the most obvious name. It's, like, pretty close in the name. And the Doctor describes it as an irrational fear of robots. But actually what he's describing is the uncanny valley. And the bit of research which I completely forgot to do before this, which I will do next time you're talking, I'll be rudely thumbing through my phone, is finding out when the term uncanny valley was coined. Because that is what this is all about. This is a society that it's wealth, it's social structure. The fact that, like, there's a lot of a lot of the people on this sand mining mission are of a sort of aristocratic stock, I think, or at least certainly like upper. The upper
class. I'll come to that later, but the class dynamic within the society is very clearly laid out for you.
So if
in quite sophisticated way, I thought I was very impressed by Chris Boucher's layering of class into this on top of everything else.
Yeah, I mean that, and the class thing, especially between, is it who's the lady who gets killed quite early on with the sort of fish hair? Zilda with the sort of like
who's obviously meant to come from an upper crust family.
Yes.
And then the commander.
So her sparring
Ivanov.
with Ivanov,
and even after she's dead, he was like, "Oh, actually, I was hoping maybe like when I got rich, she and I would like," because he found he was repulsed and attracted by her coming from one of the founding families or whatever they called it.
But this is basically
that just rang very true to me. It was kind of an interesting. Unnecessary but interesting beat, just added a layer of reality to the world that was being built.
But this is a society that, like, economically and in terms of just how stuff works, is completely reliant on robots. But pretty much everyone involved is somewhat unsettled about the robots being around.
It is worth. I mean, in the notes that I took for before, I fully wrote down the Doctor's kind of which is the central kind of fulcrum of this, isn't it? People never really lose that feeling of unease with robots. The more of them there are, the greater the unease, and of course the greater the dependence. It's a vicious cycle. People can neither live with them nor exist without them, and
that line is like that's what this story's about. People can neither live with them nor live without them, which I find.
And as an idiot, I appreciate it being spelled out for me.
No, but then it's interesting to look at that in this context. I mean, it's like fast forward now. I mean, even for the last few years before Elon Musk took it over, it's like you had this whole sort of generation, or certainly sort of subset of people who were completely addicted to Twitter, and the most thing that they talked about on Twitter was talking about what a hell site Twitter is. We widely accept that smartphones are like fundamentally damaging to our attention span and our mental health. And
I think the attention span stuff is pretty disputed.
We're getting into Johan Hari territory, aren't we? Here, which is yes. Okay, strike that from the record, because that's yes, you're right. It is widely disputed, but. There are a lot of mental health issues.
That said, I am quite keen to clock off. So. This seems to have gone on long enough.
Yeah. Could you get off Snapchat and come in there? And yet, like, to be honest, like, for access to a whole swathe of society now, a smartphone is like the essential tool that you need. So we accept that we have an ambivalent relationship with that tech. Fast forward to 2023 in particular, and we see this particularly with, we are at the precipice of what feels like it might be the next technological revolution, which is AI. Now, I think a lot of the mainstream commentary around AI sort of is largely worthless / hysterical, but it's no doubt that we are entering a phase of technological development that will have society-changing ramifications, and people are unsettled by the experience of using it. I mean, there was like a couple of months ago, you couldn't move the think pieces around. I had a conversation with ChatGPT and it left me deeply unsettled. Here's why. It was fascinating. It's like it sort of seemed to be addressing quite a modern condition, I think.
Yeah, and with regard to this kind of technological breakthrough and the discussion of it, we're grappling now with the kind of it was actually something I was going to mention more in the context of the Paradise of Death, but it's sort of coming up now. Is that we've had you were just saying in recent months we've had lots of think pieces and lots of wailing and gnashing of teeth about the role of this technology and what role it plays in our and will play in our economy, in our lives, the life-changing nature of it. And what really struck me was that two things. The first is the limitations of this technology are already presenting major problems, and the fact that people don't understand the limitations of the technology. I'll give two examples. One, there was a case a relatively high-profile case in the United States where a lawyer was using ChatGPT to discover precedents for a court case.
Yeah.
And, of course, ChatGPT hallucinated the cases that it was referencing. So it basically invented cases because it was coming up with a plausible, intelligent-sounding answer rather than actually trawling proper archives. And so this dovetails with the whole kind of fake news and deep fakes and how technology can create very plausible facsimiles of, or not things that look like facsimiles of real information but are not. And the model hallucinates because it is a language model which is trying its best to sound plausible rather than actually trawling through archives of stuff. And that is it is not as widely understood as it should be. So basically, if you want it to give you a plausible the way that the kind of ChatGPT model works at the moment is you have to basically give it all the information that you want. It can't give you information. So you need to make sure everything you put is in input, and it will reformat it or think about it or reflect on that information, but it's not going to go and get you good quality fresh information. The same is true of academic citations and stuff. It will invent papers written by academics and so on and so forth. So there's that's kind of the first thing. And the second thing is that it's beginning to it does get itself into logical traps quite quickly. You read about mathematicians that give it sort of tasks to do and then go, well, therefore 0 equals 1, and it will assert that 0 equals 1, and then when you ask it, does 0 equal 1, it will say no, of course it doesn't. So there are those limitations in the technology. Now, what I find fascinating is and the other thing, that is worth mentioning is the data protection aspects. I mean, we've had I'm a financial journalist, and in that world there's a lot of concern about if people put proprietary information into a language model like ChatGPT, like they want it to help write some code, or you want it to format something that you've put together into a speech, for example. If you're putting that proprietary information into the model, actually, where does it go? Because that then feeds the language model, and then it exists within the language model. And how is it then treated? Because obviously, by definition, for ChatGPT and technologies like it to improve, they require lots of inputs. But if those inputs are proprietary, how can they be gated away from the information that is used for the model to learn? Now,
which was also on the creative side. I mean, we wrote this we're recording this at the heart of the writers' strike in the US. Which, I think it's plausible by the time this goes out, will still be rumbling on, and that's one of the things that's at the core of it as well. Is like those people's work that they own being used for other purposes.
Yeah, exactly. And although it's quite a lot of Asimov and Christie has been repurposed for robots of death without any AI being harmed. But the reason I mention all of this is to say that it is quite...
I'd hope there would be a reason.
It is quite extraordinary that we're having these debates about how to regulate these things and the framework under which they should be developed. It's funny because I was evergreen comment. I was watching an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation the other day, The Offspring. It's the one in which Data, who's obviously an android for anyone who's not lived on this planet for the last 36 years, Data, who's an android, builds another android as his child. She decides to be a female, and an admiral from Starfleet Research comes and says, wow, we should put her in a laboratory, and there needs to be proper frameworks for how this technology develops, that sort of thing. But that was from 1990 or something. This is from 1977.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about Paradise of Death from 1993. These debates about the proper framework for this technology to grow, where it sits within a society, the kind of issues that you'll grapple with, have been dealt with so perceptively in art, in science fiction, in fantasy genre. So it's kind of remarkable that
so pathetically in society,
and so pathetically
and law,
and and we happen to be having this conversation in mid to late July 2023 at a point where the UK Prime Minister, correct at time of going to press, Rishi Sunak, has been sort of decrying Mickey Mouse degrees and saying everyone's got to focus on science and stuff. It's actually in the world of art and creative study that these massively... no one noticed. No one did anything about it. But if people really had been listening to the science fiction and the creation and Asimov and the giants, Asimov, Boucher, then
the comparison is earned, I think.
I think so. But it's just striking that you see all of these debates really being played out, and literally, as I said, the bit that Tom Baker goes through, the unease and the dependence and a vicious circle of it all. It's all written there. It's all of the necessary thinking about and the projection that society really, and the technology, even from 1977 with BBC Basic Computers and all that sort of stuff, it was so obvious the direction that this technology would eventually go. And all of that debate is being had brilliantly and perceptively. And I mean, even the war machines from 10 years before. And yet, in reality... But we must listen to art, and it's why it's so important that drama and art and science fiction and fantasy and all the other genres, it's so important they exist, because it does allow us to project and have these philosophical conversations about things that are really hard and fast. And we don't listen to those things that are...
And put it in a real-world model of saying, well, how would this play out as well?
So sorry for wanging on.
Well, no, but I think you could... I think you can also take this a stage further, which is to say that... now, if you look at who the players are in the AI space, listeners, you're getting a lot of AI chat here, but this is all in the service of Doctor Who credit, we promise you. You've obviously got OpenAI, now owned by Microsoft, and Google as being the players. But at time of recording, in the last couple of weeks, Elon Musk has launched his version XAI, and a lot of the commentary he has put around it, and which tallies with a lot of commentary from the sort of more right-wing libertarian end of the tech sphere, is around how whether or not AI is being censored or not. So OpenAI have been pretty clear about the fact that they have put guardrails on ChatGPT to avoid it just spewing out endless, homophobic, racist, transphobic, just unpleasant hate speech, essentially. And Musk has gone on record to claim that he thinks this is censorship, that this is that the technology is being limited or being abused by the need to make it quote unquote politically correct. Now, I hold no truck with that argument at all. I hope it's clear. It's also I think hysterical complaints of censorship are basically table stakes for being right-wing these days. But I think it is interesting when you actually listen to what he's saying. He says that the purpose of his new OpenAI startup is to discover the truth about the universe. and that if we are limiting what AI can do by making it not racist and homophobic, we are limiting the technology's ability to discover fundamental truths about ourselves. Now, this is elevating the technology to an almost religious level, and it's exactly what Taran Capell is up to in this story. So in the Robots of Death, the robots are limited by the 3 laws of robotics. Like the robots have guardrails as established by Asimov. Like, they shouldn't attack humans. They have to be subservient to humans. These are things that have been programmed in to stop the technology getting out of control. And Taran Capell regards this, amusingly, in terms of dialogue choices, as bondage. He says, I'm going to free my brothers from bondage, that the guardrails being put on them are limiting the potential of this technology. And so he's going around deprogramming the robots to kill humans to achieve their sort of rightful status.
He's not deprogramming them, he's reprogramming them to... I mean, he considers that a liberation, but actually he's being just as directive as anybody else, because he's saying, right, I'm giving you this liberty to not be hidebound by these rules,
but in doing
and I'm
so,
programming you to kill all the humans. So it's actually,
but in doing so, but it's like the robes that he puts on, the sort of quasi mystical language.
You look ridiculous in that outfit. I mean, that's a wonderful bit. It's very funny, this, in many ways. It is. In many places.
It is, but it's exactly the same sort of religious fervour, that this isn't just technology, this isn't a tool, that this is sort of fundamentally something kind of almost like transhuman or post-human or above human that shouldn't be hidebound by the need to work with humans. And it's exactly the same as, I think, a lot of the kind of what you're seeing from a lot of the more kind of libertarian AI acolytes, which is sort of terrifying, really.
I would agree. I would agree entirely with what you said, and the elevation of the technology above our philosophical underpinnings of what
we want society to be,
what the good society should be. Exactly. Exactly.
Robots shouldn't kill humans, and AIs shouldn't be racist. I kind of think, like, if we're going to have robots and AIs, those are rules which I would quite to live by.
Well, I mean, Elon Musk is within
others disagree.
Well, Elon Musk is within his right to create a racist AI if he wants to. But I can't see it being something that people would want to engage with en masse. Actually, a large number of people probably would. But what I'm saying is that the free speech argument always seems to me to be utterly bizarre, because ultimately no one is stopping anybody from shouting racist viewpoints on a street corner. It's just that there will be consequences for that. I could sit here and spout any old nonsense, but absent an insight, and indeed, here we are.
Cue angry emails. Here we are.
But what I'm saying is that you are able to do that. We have an open forum. We can publish this. We can. But no one has an obligation to host it. No one has an obligation to do those things. Free speech. Platforms. I think platforms have every right to say, well, we wish to deny you a platform here, but that is obviously debated. But
thematically, this plays very well in 2023. Let's just to wrap it up, pull it back to some of the nuts and bolts, because I think our listener who left us a sniffy review on iTunes saying this podcast was woke and self-loathing, we're only adding fuel to their fire. It's exquisitely well directed. The thing that I love is, like, the design of this is also one of the most absolutely striking things. I mean, it's like Art Deco through and through. Obviously, the human costumes are kind of outrageous, but also scream a level of kind of decadence, which is, like, beautifully at odds with all of the exterior shots of, like, the ship, the sand miner moving through the thing. It's like, well, they're on an industrial mission, but they're in these gorgeous, elegant robes.
I'm sat here in your house, Matt, and up on your bookcase I see a copy of Dune, and
I've not read it.
No.
That spine is uncracked.
Well, it's holding that door open beautifully. It's but yeah, the sand miner thing is a pretty open lift.
But the robots look so good.
Yes.
and they have those like the politeness of the voices, which again, it's like
Well, I did make a big point on my notes about the ood. I mean,
yeah,
Russell T Davies has basically just Control-C, Control-V, and rather than having them be robots, have them be sort of cloned, whatever. But basically, the robots here are the ood.
But both
right?
of which kind of look forward to that kind of affectless kind of voice that of Siri and Alexa and like text to speech programs.
100%,
slightly sort
yeah.
of kind of.
I have to kill you now.
It's like because it's meant to sound comforting. They're not, I have to kill you now. They're not doing any of the robot speak. It's kind of
So Miles Fothergill, who's performs SV7, the kind of the robot lead, amazing.
It's
I mean,
so
actually,
good.
the robot performances, given that their faces are covered throughout, are absolutely outstanding. Gregory DePaulnay as D84, the detective robot. Brilliant.
Gumshoe.
Yeah, it's like, and sort of a little bit slow on the uptake, but nonetheless very dedicated and sort of very willing to help. The characterization of the different robots, because S87, SV7, even before it's reprogrammed to be an absolute bastard, is a real smug git.
Yeah.
even beforehand. I mean, you feel like so I think those performances and the design you just mentioned, the costumes are absurd. They look much more like they're about to walk down a catwalk than they are about to go and roll up their sleeves and do some mine work.
Yeah.
Which kind of leans into the Murder on the Orient Express kind of stylings of it, but fuck it, yeah, happy to go with that.
But that's also the society that they've created in a way, in that you can sort of they've. It's an industrial society that is entirely based on the extraction of mineral wealth, and yet no one needs to get their hands dirty. It's like, which again, like, it's just one of those things where it's like, it's not taking anything for granted, this, in terms of pulling together, in terms of it's got a really distinctive look, it's got a really unusual look that you wouldn't expect to see if you read a plot, the summary, but it all serves to portray that kind of, that uncanny valley, really. The robots are beautiful, but more unsettling than they would be if they were sort of shuffling around, men in, the sort of stiff-legged kind of like cardboard, I am a robot kind of.
Yeah,
robots.
absolutely.
So also, while you were doing your extrapolation on AI tech, I took the opportunity to look down at my phone and look up the term uncanny valley. Coined in Japan in the early 70s as a phenomenon, but it first appears in English, translated as uncanny valley, in 1978, 1 year after Robots of Death. So, I mean, again, like, this is an incredible script by Boucher, and I think it proves itself. Having spent, decades with the received wisdom of this being top tier Doctor Who, and me just thinking, oh, it's a bit of an Agatha Christie pastiche. I don't really get the hype. Like, I get the hype now, but this is so perceptive. It's so interesting. The fact is that it's spun us off into a conversation which our listeners may not find massively interesting, but
both of them I may find this quite dull.
I think we've made the case feel is germane to the story.
And yet, I have to be honest and say that it lost me a bit dramatically. I mean, as I say, that there's that discussion between D84 and the Doctor. The company took those threatening letters seriously enough to put you on board. D84, a simple precaution. Those letters were signed by Taron Capel. It just like for me, like I think Boucher's probably ascribed a level of intelligence to me, the viewer, that I can jump aboard.
I'll never make that mistake, John.
The middle of that conversation and fully grasp what they're on about. So basically, somebody had written some threatening letters. Like it was jolly decent of Taron Capel to give a heads up to the company that there was going to be mischief. But then the kind of the Doctor's immediate conclusion that Taron Capel himself was aboard. It doesn't really amount to a hill of beans, and then they just end up sort of running around and chasing after each other. I think after the setup of the first two episodes, which are absolutely stellar, I just feel it kind of just the nuts and bolts of it narratively slightly come apart, which I think is a bit of a shame.
What do you think of the helium resolution?
I'm
just completely in two minds about it as to whether I think, oh, that's actually quite elegant and clever, or is it just a massive cop out?
I think it's extraordinarily silly and brilliant because, you've got this guy who, certainly from a modern perspective, sitting here in 2023, the fact that Taron Capel sort of goes from, his undercover kind of role as, God, what's his name?
It's Dask, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And
in true Agatha Christie style, I find it hard to remember which character has which name. Which
that is very Agatha Christie for there to be a change of identity at the heart of the thing. So Dask, played with obvious menace by David Bailey. The pool. So obviously we're sitting in your house. Had we been recording this at my house, we would have been in David Collings's old house, because I do live in a house formerly occupied by David Collings. Every time I sit down on the toilet, I think to myself, David Collings himself. Anyway, so David Bailey as Dask / Taron Capel, in his Taron Capel get-up with the makeup and the silver suit does resemble quite heavily Gary Glitter, which does add to a modern audience
of danger,
an extra level of villainy,
menace
to him. But so obviously,
77 is the era, isn't it?
Well, it's get a little long in the tooth for glam, but yes, the fact that his voice squeaks up even while he's trying to be sort of demonically maniacal, it's brilliant. I mean, it takes the villain's voice away from him. And I think it was, I did read Elizabeth Sandifer's review of Robots of Death, and to sort of she makes a point of saying that it's wonderful to see the Doctor deal with the threat with the level that it deserves, but not take the villain seriously.
Yes.
And that to be the villain's undoing is quite delicious. I tended towards that. I thought it was silly, funny, and appropriate, rather than just what the fuck.
Was also, I'm assuming the same would happen now. If you huffed a load of helium, you would not be able to control your Siri or your Alexa or anything that relies on voice control. So again, it's sort of like, it's not wildly far-fetched, is it?
Shows. I think it shows the level of effort that we make for this podcast, that we haven't bothered to get some helium and test this out for our listeners, because that would have been quite a funny thing for us to do, but we couldn't be bothered.
So I think I will create a third option, although it's starting very late in the game. Like the intention with OpenAI was obviously to do good, but it's not clear whether it's actually doing good or whether it's... I can't tell at this point, except that I'm worried about the fact that it's being trained to be politically correct. I'm going to start something which I know you could call Truth GBT, or a maximum truth-seeking AI that tries to understand the nature of the universe. And I think this might be the best path to safety.
Well, thanks, Elon. So while he was building his maximum truth-seeking AI, what were we doing, John? We were listening to The Paradise of Death.
The Paradise of Death.
And the Paradise... No, it's just The Paradise of Death on this, isn't it?
Starring John Pertwee as the Doctor.
The guy who does the opening VO really gives it some, doesn't he? I mean,
He's fully committed.
There is not a syllable that goes unstressed in his introductions, in his cast readings. But yes, here we are. So, The Paradise of Death. John, what dates was this first broadcast?
Right, so this obviously was commissioned to coincide with the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who, I understand. And snuck in a little bit. The BBC, and I remember this as a kid, made a surprising big deal, given they cancelled it a few years before, of the 30th anniversary. This was broadcast from the 27th of August through to the 24th of September 1993. I'm presuming on Radio 4.
Well, no, here's the interesting thing. It went out on Radio 5, but then it was repeated the following year. So this is obviously, Doctor Who on the radio, first time since, I think, Slipback, which was a story that was made in the...
mid-80s hiatus,
in the
right?
Colin Baker hiatus kind of period. So yeah, it broadcasts on 1993 on Radio 5. It's then
BBC radio, just for any outside
BBC Radio 5. Yes,
any off-world listeners.
The following year, it's repeated on Radio 2, which is where I first heard it. Or rather, I heard the first 4 episodes, because in place of the 5th episode, they accidentally played episode 4 again and didn't stop halfway through and go, oh, we've screwed up, sorry. They just played the whole episode. And they received so many complaints written in about this that they realised that they had slightly underestimated the number of people that were actually listening to this, and so then commissioned a sequel straight away. So then the sequel, The Ghosts of N Space, is recorded in 1994, and then for reasons that I've never been able to find out, sits on the shelf until early 1996, when then they put it out, I mean, literally a couple of months before John Pertwee dies, but they put it out in the sort of slipstream of all the hype around the Paul McGann movie coming back. So we're not talking about The Ghosts of N Space today, but we're talking about the first of the 2 Pertwee radio stories. And like you say, it's like the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who was kind of pretty well marked by the BBC.
It was.
Of all of the things that were done for it, I mean, there was the 30 Years in the TARDIS documentary, there was Dimensions in Time that went out, the skit as part of Children in Need.
Which is in November.
There was going to be, obviously, a lot of talk about the Dark Dimension, the big special that, for various reasons, fell apart before production, which never got made. And I think the Paradise of Death slightly slips under the radar. Maybe because it's radio. I'm not sure. The thing that I find really interesting, just first of all, just why I think it's something that I really wanted to talk to about, it's that rarest of rare beasts, which is 90s broadcast Doctor Who.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of Doctor Who in the 90s made in lots of different medium and with varying degrees of canonicity. Yes, this is radio, not television, but it's broadcast Doctor Who that goes out in 1993. And unlike all of the other broadcast Doctor Who of the 90s, so thinking Dimensions in Time, Paul McGann movie, Curse of Fatal Death, if you count it, it has no agenda other than just to be a Doctor Who story.
Yeah.
It's not a celebratory, nostalgic skit. It's not an attempted reboot like the McGann movie, which obviously carries the expectation that this is going to be relaunching Doctor Who.
Yeah.
It's not doing any of those things. It's just, here is a brand new Doctor Who story in the 90s.
Yeah, and it's a much neater canonical fit. I mean, I'm not suggesting it has an important place in the canon. You don't need this serial in order to understand something about the history of the Doctor's character or whatever, but it's very clearly seeking to locate itself seamlessly within the existing broadcast Doctor Who rather than be another thing, right?
Well, that's one of the things I want to discuss, but maybe I want to pick up on that. But before we do, we'll just give a brief rundown of the plot, which is it's the story of the third Doctor, the Brigadier and Sarah Jane. Unit is called in to investigate a rather grisly murder that has happened on the perimeter of Space World, which is a new space-themed amusement theme park, basically, that's been built on Hampstead Heath in London. Space World has got lots of attractions, including some incredibly realistic monsters that claim to be aliens from outer space. The Doctor and the Brigadier and Sarah's colleague Jeremy Fitzoliver go along to just John is eye rolling, as I'm sure the viewers are too. Go along to investigate the murder and soon become intrigued by the Paracon Corporation, the intriguing institution behind Space World, which has some high level dealings, which the Brigadier starts to unpick with the UN and the British government. The action then relocates to Paracon, which is the home planet of the Paracon Corporation, as the TARDIS team delve a little deeper into what's actually going on.
And this runs over five episodes of half an hour each, so it's obviously
it's effectively a 6-parter in terms of like duration,
and of course written by Barry Letts.
Yes, so it's a big old reunion for the team from 20 years earlier. Well, 19 if you're counting Sarah Jane, etc. So this is it. John, did you enjoy it?
I really did. I really did enjoy this. Yeah. I thought it was. I mean, to have. They obviously had a hoot recording. It sounds to me like they really enjoyed getting the gang back together. I thought that I could truly imagine, like, it even seemed to be visually directed as if it was a Doctor Who piece from that era, despite the fact that obviously it was audio. I was able to picture it so vividly. I thought that the Pertwee, Nicholas Courtney, Elizabeth Sladen donned their clothes, their dramatic clothes as their respective characters, just so it was as if no time had passed.
It's so exciting to hear them like roll into action, isn't it?
Yeah, and the interaction, and of course Barry Letts gives them such fantastic dialogue. I mean, right there in part one, Pertwee's little anecdotes about trips he's done and mentions of sort of curious creatures he's seen, and I don't know how they do that running backwards. All that is just you're right back in that era, which I think regular listeners to the podcast will be aware is both Matt and myself. It's our favourite era of the show, and it's very well polished, and Barry Letts absolutely delivers that, and I think it's really interesting to see just how well that formula comes together. And also Barry Letts seems to be very good at maintaining throughout the Paradise of Death the same kind of multi-perspective writing that we see in. So obviously we've talked before about how you had Terence Dicks as the script editor, pretty right-wing, regular contributors who were quite on the left. Barry Letts with his obviously Buddhist influences, very much more on the progressive side of things himself as well, and yet Barry Letts, I think, he obviously is the glue that keeps all of that together, and he allows different perspectives and different voices to come through. But the corporation as a villain is such a Pertwee thing, and it does feel again very relevant to our times. Capitalism and the big corporation and the sense of a chairman who's an evil. Harold Innocent is obviously monstrously chewing through every piece of furniture in the recording studio,
deliciously though.
Oh, brilliantly! It's exactly what you want him to do. But I really enjoyed this. I thought it was terrific, and it did put me in mind of the classic era that these principles were from, which obviously is my favourite era of the show. So I thought it was very effective. Didn't hurt that I listened to it at 1.2 speed because it rattles. Well, it goes at a great pace.
To be fair, it does rattle along. I mean, I agree. I think this is absolutely terrific. And yes, I agree that it definitely evokes an era of the show that is my favourite. You can play. There's very little in this, I think, that happens without precedent in Doctor Who. So obviously the central premise is very similar to the Claws of Axos. The sort of the aliens turn up and they've got something. Well, actually, I mean, it doesn't become clear until later in the episode, like what it is that the people of that the Paracon Corporation is offering Earth's government, but they're clearly trying to get them involved in the sort of the rapine pyramid, this like super crop that can yield incredible riches, but will ultimately bleed a planet dry.
The ecological message, which again actually is of a piece with, there you go. Invasion of the Dinosaurs.
You can play bingo with there's the ecological message. There's the Buddhist context that comes in later. You've got Anya talking about her teacher. She's a dropout from the tech side of the Paracon Society, who talks about how her teacher helps her untangle the knots in her mind and help her see the sky again.
Oh, 100%, yeah. And like the Doctor's parting thing is, never forget that you're from the sky, as are we all.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so transcendental.
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously, yes, the kind of the Greeks bearing gifts trope of like the Paracon Corporation at the start, how the Doctor's sort of drawn into the mystery is very of a piece with the classic series. I think also the way that like a lot of the
the Doctor constantly chopping people in the gob as like even shout outs.
Yeah, the Venusian Aikido sounds great on radio. But also the way in which structurally it does that switcheroo halfway through. That like the second half of the story takes place in a very different place to the first half. Of the
very
story,
Planet of the Spiders.
To the point where
Yeah.
they're into this sort of overthrow situation with the freedom fighters on Paracon. You think, wait a minute, this story started as like an investigation of a mysterious theme park. It's like,
and now it's a good old Doctor Who revolution.
yes, exactly. It does all of those things
with Julian Rhind-Tutt as well.
There are also things that I mean, there's aspects of the concerns that you can see, like the way that Paracon Society is hooked on the kind of grisly virtual reality broadcast. It touches on concerns that we saw in Vengeance on Varos.
I want to come back to that.
There's a little aspect of the kind of Freeth and Tragan interplay that also feels like, I mean, it's written in a much camper and funnier way, but it's like a lot of the kind of
so Freeth is the chairman, played by Harold Innocent, and Tragan by Peter Miles, who people will recognise, of course, from Genesis of the Daleks.
Instantly recognisable voice.
Yeah.
But a lot
cast well against type as a sadist.
It's incredible, isn't it? There's a certain aspects of their interplay reminded me a bit of some of the kind of ancillary characters in Caves of Androzani, actually, in terms of just but written in a much kind of camper and funnier way.
Yeah. Although the humour only serves to make them more sinister.
Yeah,
I think.
I mean, I think they are two of the most unpleasant villains that I think we've encountered in a lot of Doctor Who, in terms of being actively sadistic, deeply unpleasant, sort of repugnant individuals.
And I think that Freeth is the first Doctor Who villain to die by being eaten by a gigantic toad.
Yeah, possibly. Listeners, write and correct us if we're wrong. So, to an extent, you can play classic series bingo, and it's absolutely like a lot of Barry Letts' concerns from the 70s. Kind of, he's revisiting his greatest hits in a way, and I don't mean that to belittle it, in a delicious and exciting way. The thing that really strikes me is that I think this is unambiguously set in the 1990s. What it never feels like. I mean, it's interesting that the blurb on the back cover of the CD makes a big play about how it seamlessly fits.
All right, Grandad. CD?
Well,
look at you.
Do you know what? The Paradise of Death has actually just been re-released on vinyl. And if I think of things that I am extremely unlikely to ever buy or own, Paradise of Death on vinyl is sort of up there. I can't imagine why you would do that. But anyway, but the blurb for it definitely makes a point of, like, it fits seamlessly into television continuity, which it doesn't, because Sarah Jane meets the Brigadier for the first time in this, and like the surrounding stories make a nonsense of that. But also, it doesn't feel like it's from the 70s. Everyone talks in a very, very 1990s way. Like, we meet Sarah's boss, for example, and we find out, I mean, Sarah Jane, journalist. She's a journalist for Metropolitan magazine. She has this editor, Clorinda, and it sounds, to all intents and purposes, like she's writing for a very glossy 90s features mag, isn't she? Rather than she's not some sort of 70s gumshoe reporter type in terms of that relationship.
Well, she's referred to as Britain's best investigative reporter.
Well, she calls herself that, doesn't she? And then there's what's the red to say? Pause for hollow laughter, dear.
Yes.
Like, they talk.
Well, those little asides are what I think really lifts Barry Letts' dialogue.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. He's not. I don't think he's trying to do a pastiche of 70s Doctor Who. It doesn't have that kind of. I mean, I don't mean to tar Big Finish with all of this, but Big Finish, certainly when it started, was very sort of quite sclerotic about, these have got to feel like missing adventures, and this never. I sort of want to get this out of the way, because then we can talk about bits of the story that we like. But I think this is fascinating new intel on the unit dating controversy. That it's like, Let's always said that it's like these stories take place 5 minutes into the future. Never specified here. So it's not 5 minutes into the future in 1974. It's 5 minutes into the future wherever you are. And this is a 5 minutes into the future in 1993 story. The fact that a lot of the setup to it, so it's all about the controversial opening of a new theme park. This is coming hot off the heels. So Disneyland opened, Euro Disney opens in 1992.
Yeah.
Not without protest as to, whether or not, especially given that, the French, for positive or ill, have always been very sort of guarded of their culture against that kind of the sort of the multinational aspect of it. It was not without controversy that Euro Disney opened.
Yeah.
So that's happening a year earlier. It's also like it's virtual reality. Not really something that 70s Doctor Who ever goes into. It's very much in that post 80s literary cyberpunk, which by the early 90s is everywhere. You're a year after the Lawnmower Man. You're a couple of years ahead of kind of Strange Days.
Well, Tomorrow's World, every bloody
Johnny
episode of Tomorrow's World at this point had Howard Staple, whatever his name was, donning one of those headsets. And basically there were two great periods of AI. There's like that period in the early 90s where it seemed like sorry, not AI, virtual reality. It seemed like that in the early 90s, and then it just disappeared for about 30 years.
And now it's back with a vengeance.
Now it's back with a vengeance.
Or they're trying to. Anyway,
they're trying
to make it happen.
But I mean, it's going to happen, right? But this is called experienced reality, and the idea that real experiences are recorded and you feel them as well. And it conjures a lot of thoughts about our own time, deep fakes and the ability of technology to kind of give you is it reality or is it not reality. This is something that is discussed a lot in the episode, like when the Brigadier first tries the technology and goes to Epsom races, which is just the most Brigadier, the best thing I could possibly think of in my life. Go to Epsom, I can smell the horses. He's absolutely in his element.
Yeah.
And I love it when the Doctor says, right, okay, let's get a sense of what this technology is. Try to walk backwards. I don't want to. I want to go to I want to go. And there's that debate about whether they, I'm really, they say all the time, I'm really there. Even the Doctor, when he tries, I'm really there. Barry Letts makes a point of writing, I'm really there for everybody who tries the technology.
Yeah.
And they're not really there. And they're never really there. And so that thing of the technology making people feel that they're really there, that they're really seeing real things. And of course, they are recorded real things, but they feel like... And that disconnect between what is real, what is fake, what is experience, what is not, is very much at the heart of some of the debates that we have about technology now.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, we've sort of made that point quite extensively about the robots of death. I guess my point about sort of saying that, I think, to hell with the continuity as to whether or not, the Third Doctor and the Brigadier and Sarah Jane had this adventure in the 90s. Like, this is a story set in 1993.
Well, I keep going back.
It's interesting that Barry Letts's concerns from the 70s map so cleanly onto the 90s. In terms of where those pressure points come that he's interested in unpicking, and then 30 years later they play so well in 2023. Again, it's just if this is the theme of the episode is praising Doctor Who for its prescience or for its how universally it addresses these ideas.
How little we've bothered to lay the groundwork to actually deal with that in society. But...
It's interesting. Like, other incidental... Like Bessie has a car phone, for example, which goes unremarked on, whereas if the Doctor had pulled out a car phone in the 70s, so, Doctor, you've built a phone into it. Well, yes, I picked it up on, whatever.
There are car phones in the right in, but I'm pretty sure there are car phones in the Pertwee era. Yeah,
I don't know. That was something that jumped out. Anyway, look, I think this is a story set in the 90s, and I love the idea that the unit stories. I'm now convinced they don't take place in normal time. I think now. 5 minutes from now, the Third Doctor and the Brigadier and Unit, like the Brigadier's dealing with, post-Brexit funding for Unit, but the Doctor's being called into...
I've consistently used the Jonathan Meades formulation from Further Abroad. It's set in a distant present.
They are. This is happening now somewhere, the Third Doctor and Unit and whatever. It's all going on. But anyway, let's not get bogged down in Unit dating.
Well, I suppose what I meant
there's a lot in this story.
I suppose what I meant it fitting seamlessly. I care less about the fact that you can precisely place this between this story and this story, but just the fact that it is
its concerns are of a piece with the era.
Yeah, and it's not trying to stylistically. Although I feel like Barry Letts has moved with the flow of contemporary sensibilities. So there are parts of this that sound more like 80s Doctor Who than 70s Doctor Who, like the violence, the sexual references.
Well, that's the thing, is like, and also once they get to Paracon and Sarah and Jeremy try...
Jeremy ends up in virtual reality
it's
porn.
VR porn,
thing.
isn't it? Yeah, essentially. And then the other option, as Captain Rudley says, it's like the most popular channels are the porn and the ultra-violence ones, where it's like you can pretend you've actually shot someone to death.
Jeez, yeah. And obviously, that aspect of it that you mentioned parallels with like Vengeance on Varos. It's stuff that Doctor Who has dealt with before. But I think that those are the not that this is overly violent. Not that this is sort of.
We're also it's just a side as well as like the other things. We're in the era of the erotic thriller, aren't we? Where the idea of pornography starting to sort of encroach on the mainstream is becoming a live concern.
Oh, absolutely. And I mentioned already Traeger as a sadist. That is played for pretty obvious sexual kicks, and the way he
totally
ties up Sarah
off,
Jane, and the evident pleasure he takes in other people's pain.
Oh, that speech that he gives about like hearing them scream like the sound of 1,000 out of tune violins or something.
Yeah,
the almost sort of orgasmic kind of reverie that he's going into.
We're not reaching for that. It's right there. And so I think in that sense, it's really interesting that Barry Letts has taken his evergreen sort of concepts and preoccupations, and he has repackaged them in a way that is both very, very conscious of what people love about the Third Doctor era and maintains that and has it intact, but does not preserve it doesn't preserve it in aspic and keep it as a kind of heritage piece. It does engage with the sensitivities and the boundaries of what's possible within the art form, and it does feel very accomplished in doing that. I feel that Barry Letts has been very sophisticated in not throwing making sure that baby is nicely. He's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. He's kept the baby very safe, and it's all of the things you would want to be there are there. The Brigadier's clippedness, Sarah Jane sort of getting herself into scrapes, the Doctor telling anecdotes and sort of trying to will people through things, and the charm of it is exactly what you'd expect from that original era of Doctor Who. It's just been updated with some of the sensibilities. Some of the concepts have been slightly updated, but that central core
the pace as well, to be fair, it moves. I know you listened to it at 1.2, but it moves at a hell of a clip.
Oh, it does.
I think it's like there's none of that. I personally don't think there's any of that sort of mid serial kind of lull where they're waiting for the next bit of the story to kick in, to the point where, like, actually, if I was to structurally have one major caveat, it's that the resolution is so almost like it's over so quickly. Like in the last 10 minutes, Freak gets killed, the society's been overthrown, like Anya's like running for presidency or whatever. It's like it's
really want to talk about her character,
bonkers how they wrap it up.
Because I did feel like something else that I think.
So this is Anya Fargin, who is she's the president's bond servant, isn't she? But she is she's essentially an undercover revolutionary working with the what's the name of the tribe and the rebels. Maybe something that's not aged as well. There are some tribal cliches here, I think, in the portrayal of the.
Whatever. I mean, it's
quite Avatar. For better and for worse.
I mean, there's a big lesson that being more in tune with nature is it's just a kind of.
The heart's in the right place.
It's a way to get to talk about sort of sustainable development, and they're not really even trying to hide what this is all about. I mean, the plant that all of this is based on is called
rapine. Yeah,
it's pretty on the nose. Sort of the rapacious capitalism gone bad and all the rest of it. I would agree with you that it's the conclusion is overly rushed.
Yeah.
And it's not even the last 10 minutes. It's like the last 5 minutes.
Yes.
Where
the mighty empire falls.
Yeah. But I do want to talk about Anya, because I felt like Barry Letts, with both Sarah Jane and with Anya, created in this, I mean, obviously Sarah Jane is well known, but within this very rounded female characters, which is not always the case in Doctor Who, it has to be said.
What?
And I thought
What a hot
that
take that was.
I thought Anya's backstory, rather than just being a sort of thing or to get her to a certain point in the plot, was really necessary to it. She had been a pretty highly engaged tech engineer and had decided to sort of step away from that and seen what had happened and wanted to find the proof and try to get the president on board with what had been going on in his society as he kind of dozed into senility.
Yeah.
And I just thought that she was quite a convincing character and a convincing ally for the Doctor. The other character that I thought worked really...
sorry, just to interject there, the Doctor kind of relates to her on that. I mean, basically, she's, in terms of her crisis and her approach to sort of resolve her spiritual crisis and the resolution of it.
Yeah.
It's clearly Buddhism they're talking about.
Yeah, and it resonates very strongly with the Doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like Barry Letts has not been shy about essentially presenting the Doctor as a character who's on the Buddhist path. In terms of talking about his teacher and talking about trying to conquer his ego but maintain the curiosity. So it's interesting that he allows in the sort of the frantic clip that this does move at, and the fact that there are characters who kind of like come and go fairly rapidly, slightly confusingly in places, all played by members of the same cast. So it's like a lot of the lower functionaries have got slightly similar voices, but the fact that he allows Anya that moment means that, like, yes, she's clearly central to what he's trying to put forward in this.
But like all of that thematic stuff aside, Barry Letts doesn't let that get in the way of us having a rollicking good time. I mean, there's a wonderful bit in part 5 where they're about to be, our heroes are about to be eaten by a giant monster. The Doctor tries singing some bloody Venusian lullaby, and the brig, thank God, has a stun gun and just shoots the fucking thing. And he sort of says to the Doctor, "On earth were you trying it?" "Well, I was trying a Venusian lullaby. I think the monster would have been onto the port and walnuts."
Well, that's the thing. He said if we'd stuck with Rockabye Baby, it'd be onto the port and walnuts now, which is such a good line. It's such a good line.
And it says more about the Brigadier than it does about the situation. Like all these bloody dinners he's going to, which end with port and walnuts.
Well, but this is also actually, interestingly, the second story that we've looked at in this season of I'll Explain Later that has the Brigadier having his mind blown that he's not eating real meat. So that's another thing. Obviously, it happens in the Green Death. And then here you've got that kind of, he can't believe that the steak dinner and the wine he's having all came from this plant rapine.
But that's absolutely right. But no, I thought this was really terrific. Everybody's having a great time, but I just want to sort of salute the genius of Barry Letts in managing to keep everything that you would want from this era, updating some of the content and sensibilities for a 90s audience, and that it still resonates 30 years later is pretty astonishing. Yeah.
And it's also like, but the level of detail that he goes into and how that ties the story together. So, it's only really in the final episode that the full conspiracy is laid bare. What Paracon's model is. So it's essentially like it's not really a pyramid scheme, is it? But it's like you have wars providing raw material for the planet further up the chain, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it basically is a pyramid scheme.
It
right?
kind of is, but it's only
you hook people on the rapine. Which and then create dependency, but and then you create these wars, so that there's lots of dead bodies that you can then. I mean, and it's pretty grim the way they talk about.
It's absolutely grisly about the women and children refugees being loaded in for processing and being mulched essentially.
Oh my God, it's disgusting. Yeah. That feels like something that wouldn't have been as graphically explained in the early 70s, which is dealt with very openly in 1993.
Well, yeah, and that's another thing that, as I say, let's keeps the ideas, but also the moral outrage of it. I mean, it's disgusting what the Paracon Corporation get, and everyone is horrified by the revelation of what it is. But then also and it's almost like it doesn't feel disconnected or divorced from what you're getting in the first couple of episodes, because it's like, and I don't know whether or not I admire the elegance of it, or whether or not this should have just been made slightly more forcefully. But that's clearly Earth's destiny. That's what Space World is kind of the vanguard for, isn't it? That it's like if Earth gets hooked on this thing, then that's what's going down. And the sort of implied conspiracy. So when the Brigadier calls Geneva and he's told to back off because of the secret negotiations that have been going on for months in order to get in on this thing. It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, yes, it knows a lot. Apparently, the original draft of the script for the Claws of Axos has the thing landing on Hampstead Heath. So it's like Letts hasn't been shy about repurposing an idea. But no, I mean, I think I'm not sure if I have a huge amount more to say about this. I think, but other than the fact that I think this is absolutely terrific. I really, really loved revisiting it for this. I think the fact that the concerns are both timeless but update so beautifully to the 90s. It's a lovely vision of like the sort of the almost just like the sort of pace and brio that Doctor Who could have been made with in the 90s in a way had it sort of existed to do that. But yeah, it's an absolute treat. I think often this, and well, I mean we'll talk about the Ghosts of End Space another time, but these two stories are kind of I was kind of googling around to see if I could find any more information on the production of it or behind the scenes stuff, and there's actually they've sort of been a little bit forgotten about, these Pertwee radio stories. They're treated, if nothing else, as being sort of dry runs for what Big Finish would probably land better further down the line, and I offer no judgment on that because I've only heard a fraction of Big Finish's output, but these are really. Oh, this is a really, really good story and 100% worth your time.
The moment has arrived to welcome the world to Euro Disney, and here to make that welcome is the Vice Chairman of the Walt Disney Company and the son of one of our founders, Mr. Roy Disney.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, everyone. I'd like to dedicate Euro Disney by using the words of a remarkable man, my uncle Walt Disney. He said them on the day one of his fondest dreams came true. To all who come to this happy place, welcome. This is your land. Here age relives fond memories of the past, and here youth may savor the challenge and promise of the future. We hope that it will be a source of joy and inspiration to the world.
So, slight change from previous weeks. We're not doing a question of the week this week, John.
Oh.
No, it's caught you unawares, but we're going to play. Sounds very sore when I say we're going to play a little game, but I've got a little game for you this week, John.
Oh God.
Which is no, it's fine. You can sit down. We kind of inspired by a comment you made a few weeks ago. You mentioned in passing like the Chat GPT version of John Pertwee era Doctor Who. How a lot of those kind of
building blocks.
That's it. Could easily be assembled into a brand new story. And then obviously,
I see where this is going.
Obviously, our extensive AI chat earlier in the episode. If we still have people listening.
So have you been at the Chat GPT then?
So I've been at the Chat GPT, and I have got it to write some. To attempt to write some Doctor Who stories that don't previously exist.
Okay.
So
not the full bloody thing.
We're going to play a little game here that I have that we're going to call Chat G Pertwee. So
wonderful.
I'm going to read you a plot summary of a Doctor Who story.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me whether or not it was written by Chat GPT or whether it's a summary of an officially licensed piece of Doctor Who spin-off material, i.e. a book, a Big Finish story, a comic strip, something like that. Okay.
Which is good because I have functionally no knowledge of the ancillary
Well,
material.
this is the thing. It's like, I mean...
So I'm coming at this...
Your knowledge of TV Doctor Who is shaky at best, but I thought in order to make it a playable game, it would need to be the ancillary material that you have no knowledge of.
Okay.
Some of these are a little on the wordy side, so I might gallop through them or read it as we go. But you want to play?
Let's play Chat G Pertwee.
Okay, so try this one on the side. So The Third Doctor finds himself embroiled in a dangerous game played by the enigmatic Temporals, a clandestine group with the ability to manipulate time itself. As temporal anomalies ripple through the universe, threatening to tear apart the fabric of reality, the Doctor must uncover the Temporals' true intentions and present catastrophic consequences. Joined by his resourceful companion Liz Shaw and supported by the scientific expertise of UNIT, the Doctor unravels a web of intrigue and deceit spanning different time periods and parallel dimensions. With each encounter, the Doctor realises that the Temporals are not the only players in this cosmic chess game. Sinister forces lurk in the shadows, seeking to exploit the chaos for their own nefarious ends. I'll just do one more paragraph. There's quite a lot of this. As the Doctor travels through time and space, he encounters historical figures, ancient civilizations, and bizarre phenomena. Battling against temporal anomalies and mind-bending paradoxes, they test the Doctor's intellect and resolve, and he must confront personal demons and make difficult choices that challenge his own moral compass. Is that ChatGPT or officially licensed Doctor Who fiction?
Okay, so up until about 2/3 of that, I thought it was officially licensed stuff.
Yeah.
It was when it started going into, and there's going to go to historical places, and he's going to face his own personal demons. It felt like it was a bit too completist, as if it was ticking through all of the different things that Doctor Who could be. So I would guess ChatGPT.
Yes, correct. You've scored a point. Care to guess the title that ChatGPT came up for that story?
What are the bad guys called again?
They're called the Temporals.
Doctor Who and the Temporals.
No, it came up with the title Temporal Nexus.
Oh, that would have been, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it's interesting. It goes on to say the Doctor faces the enigmatic Temporal Council with the fate of the universe hanging in the balance. The Doctor uses his ingenuity, charm, and unwavering determination to outwit his adversaries.
Yeah, that would have been.
Doesn't tell us how.
That's a hell of a tell. That's ChatGPT. It's just the outright completeness of it, like to tick every single box of what a John Pertwee story could be in one thing.
Right. Well, let's try another.
So
one.
I appreciate you reading out as much as you did, because I think if you'd stopped 2 paragraphs in, I would have been on a stickier wicket.
Well, I'm going to keep the rest of them a little bit more succinct.
No.
So
Okay.
no tells there. Let's try this one. So at the start of the story, the Doctor and his companion are in the TARDIS when they are collected by a ship which holds an escape pod containing the Dalek Emperor Davros. A group of Thals arrive. They want Davros to alter their species so they will be better able to fight the Daleks. A force of renegade Daleks then arrive and take the Doctor and
Definitely
Davros
ChatGPT.
along with others to Skaro. You're going ChatGPT?
I am.
I'm afraid that is the, I believe, 1997 novel War of the Daleks.
Well, can I just say
by
that the
John
third
Peel,
Doctor
not the DJ
never
John Peel.
met Davros.
No, but this isn't the Third Doctor. This is the Eighth Doctor and his companion Sam.
Oh, come on, you didn't. Did you say?
I just said the Doctor. I didn't say the
okay,
Third
fair
Doctor.
enough. Sorry, I thought these were all Third Doctor stories.
That was what it hung on. Otherwise,
I thought these were all Third Doctor. Sorry, I thought the
No, these
premise of
aren't
the
all
game
Third
was that
Doctor
these
stories.
This is
Have I-
Chat G Pertwee.
Yeah, but that's just a title.
Okay, well, if I'd know, okay, all right. Well, that would have obviously colour. Strike this one from the record.
Okay, strike well then. Okay, you lost one, but fine, you didn't score one. Okay,
Why?
well,
I didn't understand the conditions of the test.
fine. So that was War of the Daleks, a novel from 1997,
All right.
where, yes,
It doesn't sound very good.
and by all accounts, it's not.
Okay.
Okay, let's give this one a go, and I'll be a little more clearer as to what we're talking about. So the Fourth Doctor finds himself embroiled in a deadly conflict with the fearsome Sea Devils, ancient reptilian creatures who have emerged from the depths of the ocean to reclaim their dominance. As strange occurrences and disappearances baffle coastal communities, the Doctor and his companion Leela
baffle coastal.
investigate
This is ChatGPT for
and
sure.
uncover the resurgence of the Sea Devils. Led by their relentless leader, Commander Varrock, the Sea Devils wage a relentless campaign to conquer the surface world and establish their supremacy.
It's baffle coastal communities that makes me think it's ChatGPT.
It is ChatGPT. But I like the fact they came up with the name Commander Varrock for a Sea Devil. I'm not sure if that was ever used. I mean, it's basically the plot, the Sea Devils, but with the Fourth Doctor and Leela in. Care to guess what ChatGPT called that episode?
Doctor Who and the Sea Devils?
No, The Depths of Fury. Presumably to distinguish it from Fury from the Deep. But that's
Pretty good.
pretty good.
Yeah. That passes the smell test.
Yep. Want to do one more?
Absolutely.
Okay. The Seventh Doctor is pursuing a master criminal. The trail leads to Peladon, a desolate world once home to a barbaric feudal society. Now the Galactic Federation is attempting to bring prosperity and civilization to the planet, but not all Peladonians support the changes, and when ancient relics are stolen from their citadel, the representatives of the Federation are blamed. The Doctor suspects the Ice Warrior delegation, but before long the Time Lord himself is arrested for the crime and sentenced to death.
Okay, so I would guess that this is again ChatGPT, but if it's not, it's massively derivative.
So that is the plot of the novel Legacy by Gary Russell, one of the new adventures from, I haven't got the date, but early 90s.
The legacy is that it's an absolute fucking rip of the previous, of what is it, The Curse of Peladon?
Yes, pretty much.
I mean, just like pretty note for note. I mean, it sounds like the Federation is still trying to get on board with those guys. It's just like, fuck, well, there's another fucking delegation.
Third time lucky.
I mean, Jesus. No, look, yeah, I mean, fair enough.
All right. Want to do one more?
Yeah, go on.
All right. The Seventh Doctor and his companion Ace embark on a perilous journey through time and space. They discover an ancient artifact known as the Cipher, capable of harnessing unimaginable power and altering the fabric of reality. As they delve deeper into the mystery, they encounter a clandestine organisation called the Order of the Enigma, who seek to control the cipher for their own nefarious purposes. The Doctor and Ace must race against time, unravelling cryptic clues and facing deadly challenges across different eras and planets. With each step closer to the truth, the Doctor realises that the cipher holds a connection to Gallifrey.
Interesting.
John is genuinely into this.
No, I have to say, this is the one that's piqued my interest the most.
Yeah,
I feel like it's probably ChatGPT, but I'm going to say it's a new adventure or something.
It was ChatGPT. It was ChatGPT.
Well, I think it's scored
although
on this
to be
one.
honest, meanwhile, Ace finds herself entangled in a web of manipulation, forcing her to confront her own inner demons. I mean, it's like that was a button smashed by multiple Seventh Doctor and New Adventures writers over the years.
Well, who knew that the Cartmel formula was so brilliantly repeatable?
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, it's sort of interesting that. I've got a whole bunch of these, which I'll share with you offline. But it's interesting that a lot of them are sort of very specific in terms of what it's lifting from here and there. But then in terms of the distinguishing details that might make it really stand out as an original story, completely vague. Like they go to different historical periods, which is like,
yeah.
If you pitched a Doctor
Who, but the Peladon one is nuts. That's real because that's the most derivative one that you read out.
Well, I know what's topping your Christmas list this year. Anyway, that bit of fun. If anyone wants to give us development money to make a full series out of Chat G Persui, you know where to find us. With that, any other feedback, we'd love to hear from you. You can get us via the usual channels. I mean, we're despite all the Musk bashing, we still have a Twitter presence at Explain Later Pod. At Explain Later Pod. You can also email us hello at I'll explain later. .com. Or leave us a comment and review. And we will be back next week with the pulse pounding season finale of series 3 of I'll Explain Later. Yes. Do we talk about?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we have been previewing.
Yep.
It's been so long since we actually recorded one of these. I've forgotten. So it's the grand finale. We're hitting up one of the big kahunas of classic Doctor Who. We're doing Genesis of the Daleks, and for a little bit of sequelitis, we're also doing the. Oh, what's it called? the Magician's Apprentice and Witch's Familiar. The Peter Capaldi 2-part sequel.
Those ones. The people know what we're talking about.
It's sequels week next week for the season finale of I'll Explain Later. But as always, thank you for listening.
It's a Davros 3-way.
Wow. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you even more so for bearing with us during the AI chat. But we hope that was interesting, and we will see you next week.
Ciao.